Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Things Policy. My name is Suman, your host for today. Today, I'm venturing a little outside the areas I usually discuss on this podcast. Today, I'll be discussing Pakistan, of all the things, and more specifically, its emerging role as a mediator in West Asia. We live in very turbulent times. We have there's a war in Ukraine, there's a war in West Asia. All of this is adding to a lot of confusion, and we genuinely cannot make sense of a lot of things that are happening. In between all this, in the war that is happening in Iran, the United States and the conflict between the United States and Iran, an interesting happening is that Pakistan has found itself to be in a very interesting diplomatic position, maintaining ties with Iran, close relationships with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, and also has access to Washington and Beijing. This puts Pakistan in a strategic or a very distinct position. So, to understand the why of it, why has Pakistan emerged, what does it actually mean for all of us, and to understand what this can imply for all of us, I have with me my colleague, Aishwarya. Aishwarya studies and researches Pakistan in great level of detail, and she has also keen interest in the West Asia crisis at this point in time. She has an interesting paper which is out on our website, which is called SWOT Analysis of Pakistan itself. So she's going to help us unpack this entire thing, and we'll try and figure out how to make sense of this whole thing. Welcome to the show, Aishwarya.
Thank you, Suman.
Yeah, so to start off, what do you make of this in the sense that why Pakistan? What made Pakistan the mediator everyone was willing to talk with?
Thank you for the question. I think, as you mentioned in your introduction, Pakistan occupies a very rare position of being simultaneously acceptable to all major stakeholders in this conflict, right? There's Iran, Saudi Arabia, United States, China, and key Gulf states as well. Unlike Oman or Qatar, who have been traditional mediators in international conflicts, Pakistan was not directly exposed to military strikes. It does not host any American bases. And interestingly, it has no relationship with Israel, which makes it, more acceptable in Tehran. So this allowed Pakistan to preserve a degree of distance from the conflict, despite the impact that could affect Pakistan itself. So its utility also came from, long-standing competing actors. These are not just capitals that Islamabad has ties with, but if we look at the broader international working, these are also competing actors. Pakistan has defense relationships with Saudi Arabia. It has workable ties with Iran, which it also shares a 900-kilometer border with. It has access in Washington, especially under Trump 2.0. And let's not forget, Pakistan also received endorsement from Beijing, and that green signal to mediate this conflict also kind of got backing from a major player. Pakistan's military-led foreign policy also enabled rapid decision-making and direct channels of communication that civilian bureaucracies often cannot provide, or more delayed in its process. So ultimately, Pakistan was not chosen because it was the most powerful mediator, but because it was most acceptable and available intermediary at a moment when traditional channels had narrowed, when it comes to mediators like Oman or Qatar or even Turkey that has tough ties with Iran. So I think that is, if we look at the initial framework, that's how Pakistan becomes, in the current scheme of things, a better, more viable choice to be a mediator in West Asia.
Yeah, thanks, Aishwarya. I think the point about geography also has to be taken into consideration, because I think Oman and Qatar share a border with, or are very close to Iran in some sense. So maybe, whereas Pakistan is a little distant, so makes it a little more of a neutral ground in terms of just geography and having these kind of mediation talks that we are talking about. Yep. The other thing that you talk in your paper is the trust versus utility, paradigm, or the two factors or two contrasting things. Should we look at them together, or are they different things when it comes to Pakistan? Are they more trustworthy, or are they just utilitarian at this point in time?
Right. Speaking of Oman and Qatar, both these countries, Qatar houses US bases, so that immediately made it a target for Iran. If we go back even to the Cold War times and we look at US Pakistan relationship, it has always been transactional, where uh, the United States has always looked at the utility of Pakistan for its immediate interests, its strategic interests, specifically centered in Afghanistan. And very similarly, this paper also argues that Pakistan's value lay far more in utility than in trust. If I would actually go as far as to say that if we look at institutional ties between Pakistan and America, there is some degree of mistrust when it comes to American bureaucrats in Pakistan. Because we have seen during the War of Terror times where Pakistan was playing a double game, where it has ties with the Taliban, and of course after Osama bin Laden was found in Abbottabad, that definitely increased this degree of mistrust with them. So even when it comes to West Asia, Pakistan was not trusted in the sense of being seen as wholly neutral or having some altruistic motives in mediating. Rather, it was useful because it maintained channels to actors who could not communicate directly. Even now, we saw that Iran and US talks that were held, the 20-hour long talks that were held in Islamabad, these were direct talks that were held after 1979. So I think its mediation was underpinned by Pakistan's access to Tehran, Riyadh, Washington, and Beijing. I know I keep repeating this, but there is great value in understanding that Pakistan has communication lines opened in all these capitals. Pakistan also has domestic incentives to prevent regional instability. So the minute a mediator also has enough reasons for this conflict to end, that automatically increases its utility. That, Pakistan is serious about mediating this conflict because it also affects them directly. And obviously, the ability to relay messages and convene talks quickly. There are cultural ties with Iran, there are institutional ties with the US, at least military to military institutional ties. Despite a level of mistrust, there is familiarity in how these two countries operate. Okay. So I think this reflects a broader pattern in Pakistan's foreign policy, that Islamabad derives influence by positioning itself as an indispensable partner during crises rather than accumulating conventional diplomatic credibility. So that's where, if we have to talk about trust and utility, I think there's more utility than trust in this relationship.
And there's no value judgment in either of
this. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. So, great that they are mediators. They're bringing everybody to the table and they're relaying messages, all of that. But can they actually drive outcomes? Can they say that, okay, stop the war here, or, do something else, or actually dictate terms for peace or anything?
When it comes to the US, we saw this from Operation Sindoor. After Operation Sindoor, Asim Munir found himself having lunch with Trump in the White House. And Trump took the credit for allegedly mediating this India-Pakistan conflict. But can Pakistan dictate terms or outcomes? The straight answer is no. I think the paper is explicit that Pakistan's role remains more facilitative and not coercive. It does not have the diplomatic capital or the economic heft to, dictate any sort of ties. I mean, even with diplomatic capital and economic heft, that becomes difficult, right? When we see a Saudi Arabia or a China trying to mediate talks between Afghanistan and Pakistan, who have actually been traditional allies, they know how to talk to each other, they have traditional ties, but even these powers couldn't dictate the outcomes between these countries. So today, when we talk about Iran and US, the rivalry runs so deep that Pakistan could only facilitate ties, and that itself, we can't take away the benefits of Pakistan doing that, but it can't dictate ties. It could open channels, shape the negotiating environment, and help sustain communication. And it has, despite talks being broken down. Pakistan is still trying to communicate between both sides, but it lacks, like I said, the economic, military, or political leverage to impose any outcomes on either Washington and Tehran. So I feel like when this paper talks about how Pakistan's influence therefore lies in four things, it lies in agenda setting, timing, message transmission, and creating off ramps during escalation. And even that could happen because both Iran and US were looking for off ramps. It's in nobody's favor to continue this war. But ultimately, I think the decision remains in US and Iran, and um, Pakistan can facilitate diplomacy, and we'll see how far
They can
do that. But to dictate its result, it's difficult,
yeah, to say the least.
to say the least.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of this entire thing is the way Pakistan is actually structured. Its military plays such a big part in every way of their life, and it's actually practically running the country, right? So, in this entire mediation process, what is the specific role of the Pakistani military? What impact can that have for them?
The military establishment was central to this mediation effort. No surprises there, of course. The Pakistani military, Pakistan's foreign policy architecture is military dominated, which allowed for faster, more coherent external engagement and, the fragmented civilian systems. When we talk about the Pakistani military right now, the elephant in the room, or not an elephant in the room, is of course Field Marshal Asim Munir. And his role was particularly important because he has an intelligence background. So the ties between US and Pakistan right now also run because there is institutional familiarity. He has potentially worked with American intelligence before. There's direct ties with US officials. We have seen a personal rapport between Trump and Asim Munir. Trump not just invited Asim Munir to have lunch with him in at the White House, but he also calls him his favorite field marshal. Asim Munir has direct relationships in Gulf capitals. We've seen the military chief very openly going and talking to heads of states. So there is a degree of acceptability among these capitals that, okay, yeah, Pakistan, if we have to engage with them, we have to engage directly with the military chief. And there is an institutional control of the military over foreign and security policy, of course, also politics and economy, but more importantly, it is an important actor that shapes foreign policy. So this paper suggests that Pakistan's mediation capacity has derived not from its foreign ministry alone, but from the military networks and its ability to bypass these bureaucratic friction. And of course, Trump's direct engagement with Munir kind of reflected this reality.
So, in a sense, you're saying that the fact that they are a democracy in name and not so much by the way they function actually has helped them to be mediators in this position.
Yeah, and Munir doesn't need to explicitly, become a military dictator like we've seen in the past, or he doesn't need a coup to rule the country. We've already seen in domestic changes that have made with 27th Amendment in the Constitution, where the military, especially Asim Munir, has way more relevance in the military. So, of course, that plays a huge role in how Pakistan gets to involve itself in the ongoing conflict.
Yeah. So, coming to, I think we'll talk about implications for India a little later, but do you have, I mean, let us China make its entry here. So, what is role of China? Because Pakistan has close ties with China, and China is at loggerheads with the US. So, where does this all fit in?
So we'll never see China be, again, we have many, many China experts at Takshashila, and I don't claim to be one. But we've seen time and again how China likes to stay on the outside of a war and never really directly engage in this.
I think we saw it in Israel, Gaza.
Right. In Israel, Gaza as well, in India, Pakistan as well,
Ukraine.
in Ukraine as well, right? So, despite China having stakes in India, Pakistan, and in the Indian subcontinent broader region, it will stay away. Of course, China did help Pakistan militarily in Operation Sindoor, but that's another conversation. When we speak of West Asia, China's role functioned less as a direct mediator, and it acted more as an enabling power. So it gave a green signal to Pakistan, where it endorsed Pakistan's mediation role. It issued joint statements supporting talks, and it definitely shares an interest in maintaining regional stability and having uninterrupted trade routes. So I would say Chinese support added legitimacy to Pakistan's diplomacy and reassured Iran that Pakistan was not solely operating within an American or Gulf framework. The paper argues that Pakistan's ability to engage both Beijing and Washington simultaneously was itself one of its major strengths. So, in this sense, China acted as a diplomatic backstop. It did not replace Pakistan's mediation, but it kind of strengthened its credibility of how Pakistan is positioned in this.
Yeah. Okay. We've spoken about Asim Munir. We've spoken about all the important people. So this seems to be very personality driven. So how would this look if it was not for Trump? I don't know if you would have had an Iran war, first of all, if Trump was not in office. But how would this look if either Trump or Munir were not in the equation? Or does this entire thing rest on personalities?
Right. That is very speculative. However, not. We have seen before the Trump administration, well, Pakistan US ties were saw a significant drop under Trump 1.0. There was that very public Twitter spat between Donald Trump and Imran Khan, where Trump basically said that why are we supporting this country, and referring to finding Osama bin Laden in the backyard. And we saw Trump cut military aid for Pakistan. So I wouldn't say that we don't know. We don't know how things would have been very, very different. But there is definitely a structural and a personal angle to where US-Pakistan ties are today. Even after Trump 1.0, Biden practically had no ties with Pakistan. The relationship was again centered on Afghanistan. There was a US withdrawal that was happening. So there was some utility in Washington for Pakistan during that withdrawal. But we saw that even Biden did not try to revive the relationship that Trump's regime had left for him. But in this case, personal rapport and personality-based ties were more important. I think Pakistan was smart enough to identify how to, for the lack of a better word, how to massage Trump's ego. And, structural factors definitely included that Pakistan's geography, its ties to the Gulf, Iran relationship, its nuclear status. It's the only country with the Islamic bomb and military dominance. However, the Trump-Munir relationship significantly amplified these advantages. We saw that there was a counterterrorism factor to it. There was political signaling. Munir gained personal access to the White House. And I would give credit to Pakistan lobbying efforts where they knew exactly how to impress Trump and get in his good books. So I would say that the paper therefore implies that this arrangement may not fully be durable. We don't know what happens when Trump leaves office. But however, the paper talks about how Pakistan's future role will depend partly on the continued dominance of Munir, who is here to stay at least until 2030 within Pakistan's system. But a different US administration or a different Pakistani leadership could reduce the intensity of this engagement.
Okay, great. Thanks, Aishwarya. Finally, we talk about implications for India because I think our listeners, I mean, after all
In the
this,
end, we
need
care
to
for
know
what happens
with
in India.
us. Yeah. So, broadly, what are the implications? And could Washington's renewed engagement with Pakistan actually complicate our relationship with the US? Okay, so, or are they, just compartmentalized? What do you think the future holds in that sense?
Right. So the paper specifically studies the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that Pakistan faces. And I think Pakistan's mediation role does not automatically translate into immediate gains against India because our economic position is very different. Right now, we have utility. There are trade ties with the US. There are energy ties with Saudi Arabia, and we look at history, right? Despite a deal that is currently existing between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, even after that, there was a conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan. However, Saudi Arabia did not take an explicit stand in favor of Pakistan against Afghanistan. So it's safe to assume that Saudi Arabia would not want to spoil its relationship with India, which is built over diaspora ties, energy ties, if there's a conflict between India Pakistan tomorrow again. However, there are some indirect implications where renewed Pakistan US engagement could restore some of Islamabad's diplomatic relevance in Washington, at least in the short term. Pakistan may seek to draw greater US attention to issues such as Indus Water Treaty. And Pakistan has understood that there is more sympathy to Indus Water Treaty
than to Kashmir.
I would actually count that as a success for India, where India has sort of managed to downplay and kind of divert that Kashmir conversation to now Indus Water Treaty. However, quote unquote water terrorism by India that Pakistan accuses India of may have more sympathy in Western capitals. And Pakistan's success as a mediator could improve its international image. However, that will completely depend on how that conflict unfolds. At the same time, I think I would also want to emphasize that India US ties are deeper and broader. Although I would also argue that US imposed high trade tariffs on India. We have not seen US explicitly support India, at least after 2019, Pelgam, even as recent as 2025. In fact, I would say the position that Trump took, claiming that he has mediated the India-Pakistan conflict and ceasefire, is slightly an anti-India position because it goes against the Simla Agreement, where third-party mediation is absolutely unacceptable to India. So there are, historically, we've seen that the US will want to stay away from this. And I think the nuclear status that India, Pakistan have, it kind of scares the world. And the minute there is a conflict, there is limited military action and, everybody would want this to downplay. And again, there are strategic and military angles to it, and we can have a separate conversation on that. But it is in India's favor militarily if the conflict lasts longer than a short-term conflict that we saw during 2019 or 2015 in Operation Sindoor.
Okay, so net, we are saying that we may see some changes, but
we may see some rhetoric, but largely structurally, I don't see any implications of US-Pakistan ties on India in how the situation is today.
Okay. So, do you have any closing comments on this? As in, how would you wrap the whole thing up in 2 lines?
It would be interesting to see how Pakistan now continues to mediate this conflict, because to say the least, it will be frustrating. It has got itself into this conflict. And I think New Delhi would be watching very closely, as we should.
Yeah, we should. And I hope our listeners will also track this. And if you have any questions for us, for Aishwarya specifically, do write into us. And we will be watching this. I'm sure Aishwarya is watching this conflict very, very closely. And when there is the next big development, we'll definitely have another show. So stay tuned, and we'll catch you for another episode of All Things Policy another time. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Aishwarya.
Thank you so much.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.